Hi everyone, welcome to our Art Chat. Art Chats are designed to garner a variety of community responses to the COVID pandemic, but we'd also like to use this platform to explore other issues that are important to our community. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Lisa Merritt. Dr. Merritt is a physiatrist in Sarasota. She received her medical degree from Howard University after completing undergraduate studies at Georgetown University with honors and has been in practice for more than 25 years. She is also the founder and executive director of the Multicultural Health Institute. The Multicultural Health Institute's mission is to level the healthcare playing field by promoting, educating, and ensuring equal healthcare access and treatment for underserved communities. Dr. Merritt, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here as well, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always good to talk to you. The work of art that I want to share with you and get your comments on today is actually a sculpture. So what I've got here is an image, and I've got a couple of other images as well. And I know it's not the same to see it on a computer screen. But what I wanted to start with is actually the list of materials that make up the sculpture. And this was a list of materials written by the artist Vanessa German herself. So I would like to begin with this description so that we can also have the conversation begin with the artist's own words. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to read the description of materials to you and
Excellent.
Then we'll jump in.
Okay.
So it is made of wood, wood glue, plaster, gauze, tar, rage, cowrie shells, love, old plastic doll parts, witness, pain, steel, cloth, twine, rage, old toy boat, ceramic figurines, meanness, rage, old white baby shoes, something precious that you cannot see and will never be able to get at, no matter how many probes you sink into my interstellar flesh. Yes, you, Uncle Sam on the lamb, porcelain doll heads from the bombed out German doll factories, humidor, rage, buttons, twine, old jewelry, and a knife to cut things with. So, given that incredibly intense, wonderful description of materials of this sculpture, what are your impressions of this work of art?
I remember this piece, and I remember the first time I saw this piece, it arrested me. It was just riveting, and it spoke to me so deeply as a woman of color in this country, from the depiction of the hair and the boat of these colonialists, supremacist white people riding on top of her, the whole concept of the nanny of women holding up the world, especially Black women, with this machete in her hand, like she's cold and she's going to take no prisoners. And it fits really with what's happening today, because when we think about Germaine, she's a self-described citizen artist. And as such, it's like her gaze, her view is attuned to the whole idea of hypocrisy, the personal individual promise, and the piercing needs that are not being met within community. And this image, the baby shoes tussled around her, all of the unmet needs of the children. There's so many different ways we could spend hours discussing this piece. But it really speaks to us, what we're going through now with the whole pandemic situation, and then the incredible social unrest sweeping the country, and the collective rage that Black bodies and Black lives are not being respected, or not being honored, that their literal fight for survival, not only just to live, to walk and breathe as human beings in this society without being killed just for existing, to the greater susceptibility to the COVID-19 pandemic because of the social determinants of health and the greater numbers of health disparities that affect the community.
And Dr. Merritt, I wanted to talk to you. I want to talk to you about both of those ideas, but in particular, and I've got a couple of images here that I'll show, but we know that there is significant racial disparity in how communities are being impacted by coronavirus. Like you mentioned, communities of color in particular are suffering inordinately. So what do you make of this, and how is your organization, Multicultural Health Institute, working to address that?
Well, it's kind of exciting for us because we have been on the ground for a quarter century, doing this work from when I was in California, and I was on the bilingual interpreting service, and developed some of the early work on cultural and linguistic competency in California, which is far ahead of the rest of the country, and policies, et cetera, to deal with their diverse populations, as well as work in Atlanta with the Reach for Wellness collective. We believe that you must look at the cultural needs of different communities and to assess why there are different rates of disease why diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, which are all things that make people more susceptible to COVID, are so rampantly higher in communities of color. And it's a multifactorial reason. And so we have worked at multifactorial solutions, starting firstly with education, empowering people's own wellness journey, understanding what their numbers are, understanding how to do screening, understanding how to read a blood pressure and take it, as well as building the future leader of STEAM health professionals from diverse backgrounds. So mentoring, we have a number of MHI scholars that we have, advised and had interned with us at Shadow with Me and other doctors, because they're the future. And we know that physicians of color tend to return to communities of color and advocate for them and take care of them and to make a difference. But we're still only 4% of all physicians in the country. So we have a big job. And through the MHI, I'm really pleased with a lot of our collectives. We've touched the lives of thousands of people over the years and also helped influence policy. Right now, we're working closely with much of the leadership locally regarding the COVID-19 response. And we've really pushed, and we were the early ones first out there. We created a mask brigade to get masks made when nobody could get masks, and get them to frontline healthcare workers around the country. Many of my colleagues were in situations where they didn't have PPE. So we were right on the front line. We've gotten out several thousand masks. We help with the homeless population locally. We help with many of the underserved and unreachable populations to get them safe, to get them information, to get them to testing when that became available, and also to identify those most at risk with respiratory issues, to make sure that we're now working on getting them pulse oximeters and ways to monitor themselves. It's a lot of work. It's good though.
It's a lot of work and really important.
We also created an electronic village green, like a community dashboard online that's tracking the live statistics. It's a collaboration of multiple organizations. So their information on what they're doing, food distributions, medication distributions, all of that work, where that is, where people can get help. We're encouraging now contact tracing, which is important, which is the CDC is madly recruiting, because we need to know, as we identify people who are positive, we know 80% of people are asymptomatic with COVID-19, but they can still spread it. We have to find out who they are, who they've been in contact with, who they work with, who they take care of, whether they have children going to school, things like that, so we can make sure and contain the spread, particularly during the next wave that's going to come in the flu season.
Right. And I think, like you mentioned in your initial comments, this is all set, the pandemic is happening, and then there's this really incredibly fraught moment right now where people are rising up and speaking out against violence against Black bodies, and, set against this pandemic that has already elucidated, these incredible racial disparities. And something that you mentioned in this sculpture, returning to the sculpture, is the shoes, of the children, the sort of the unfulfilled promise. And that's something that always strikes me. And then as I look up, I see this mirror, and it's hard to sort of make out in the image, but it's a reflection, right? When you're looking at the sculpture, you see yourself in the sculpture, and you see what's behind you being reflected. So I want to talk a little bit now and pivot a little bit to the protests that have been gripping the country. These are about the murder of George Floyd, but they're also about hundreds of years of discrimination and this inequitable system.
Oppression,
yeah.
Oppression, genocide. I mean, it's just been so blatant. And what's interesting for people of color is it's a reality we've had for generations. We've had stories we've experienced, we live with, we educate our children to be, as much as we can, protect them in this very crazy world. But only because now we have the power of social media, we have the power of the technology to video things live, and the rest of the world can see. We're just thankful. Finally, people are getting it. We weren't exaggerating. I mean, why would anybody ever want to make up a story about what happened, like what happened? Right. But that's kind of it's been like, blame the victim. And that it may seem that, he was a victim, but his death was a martyrdom as far as I'm concerned. It was a pivotal point of change. At a pivotal point, everyone was pent up from the pandemic, just coming out of quarantine. And it's the power of his death that is now changing the whole dynamic. And not only this country, around the world is watching us and watching how we're grappling with this and maybe not doing so good with it, trying to suppress the popular expression, which is part of our whole country's makeup, this whole idea of freedom of expression. Just like art, the beauty of an artist like this, to be able to create this incredible, powerful work. I mean, this is a power art. This is a power figure.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, what she's doing here is taking abandoned materials and putting them together in a similar vein as many cultural traditions where you create, you know, these power entities. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is her own version. It's a totem in a sense. It's a lot of things. The cowrie shells, that's something from West Africa that was seen as they carried value. They carried certain levels of status,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to have more. So she imbued that, you know, around their neck, you know, and the elongated neck. I mean, there's so many different things in here that really carry such deep meaning and significance. But I think it's a time of, you know, what people are so shocked by is the level of anger. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, why would you be so surprised that people would, when they finally let it out, there's this much anger because there's so many things to be mad about.
Uh-huh.
All the years of suppression, you know, the war veterans fighting all of these wars, proving themselves, integrating the military to come back and be subjected to segregation, to not have the benefit of the GI Bill the way other people had, to not be able to buy houses the way other people could, to end up being stuffed into communities surrounded by environmental toxicity that then contributes further to the intergenerational illnesses and epigenetic transmission of trauma. And there's just so many levels and layers in which people have justifiable reasons to be really, really mad. And
Mm-hmm.
it expresses also in the health conditions. This is why even adolescent Black males, as teenagers, have high blood pressure levels, you know, 10 to 20 points higher on average than their peers. They're already starting to be mad for so
Right.
many reasons. We have to change that. We have to heal the country.
We do.
This kind of work is incredible. People to look at this and talk about it. Look at her head on. I mean, look at her. Her face is determined. Look at that face. I wouldn't want to mess with this woman,
The
would you?
face, yeah, the eyes, and just even her posture, the way she's striding forward. I mean, she is moving us
She's
forward.
coming.
You
I'm
gotta get
coming
out of the way.
right for you with this thing. That's
Yep,
right.
yep. If you're not on board, you gotta get out of the way because she's
Out the way. She's gonna cut right through it.
yep, yep.
She'll cut you down. That's. I resonate with that. That's who I am.
You are a strong leader, and
You have no choice. You sink or swim this thing. And when I think of the people,
Mhm.
and one of my professors, Alice Galati, who unfortunately was one of the early victims of COVID, the
Mm.
psychiatrist, an amazing woman, powerful woman. Yeah, she was a psychiatrist at Howard. And you know, at Frances Cress Welsing, these other sheroes, I call them, who dared to speak the truth of how racism is a definable disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And it has physiological impacts of cumulative effects of microaggressions and what that does to the immune system, what that does to the cortisol levels, what that does to your endocrine axis, where you have the increased levels of diabetes and high blood pressure and all of these things. Cancer is related to this, you know, injustice,
Mm-hmm.
inequity. We have to change this now.
And I think
Time for the change.
yes, I think it's time for the change, and I think institutions, museums, the Ringling Museum is realizing that, and we are beginning to do the work. But there's a lot to do and a long way to go. So I appreciate you taking the time now to just at least jumpstart a conversation with one of our objects in our collection about how it resonates and how it feels
Yeah, I
relevant.
hope so. I'm glad to
Um,
be part of that change. I'm glad to see our community engagement work. But
mhm.
you know, the first part right now, people are experiencing collective trauma from a
Yeah.
variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's excitement, it's passion, it's reactive. But we have to go deeper than that. We have to go past words and statements and position papers, which is important. People to kind
Mm-hmm.
of get conscious on it. Now is the hard work, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like we're doing with our consultant, like we're talking about bringing that reality on, not just speaking about what it should be, but actually be part of it and the allyship that is needed. I mean, we would have never gotten out of slavery without the allyship of the abolitionists.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody's got to pull in this together. So it really warms my heart and many others to see these young people of all different kinds out there, arm in arm together. Although I'm glad they're wearing masks, I will say, and I hope everybody's washing their hands. We're
Yeah.
handing out masks. We're not marching, but we're handing out masks because this is their future. This is
Mm-hmm.
their world. So we all have to work together. We'll have to work together. And, you know, in a way, there's a positive thing. That boat is sailing up. You know, we're trying to bring this thing up. She's moving this thing up.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the work of implicit bias, and you look at even in medicine and healthcare, Black women are the least biased because we've had to deal with so many different levels of things and we can see things from many different perspectives.
Mhm.
her hair and his stuff, and all those heads going on all these different perspectives. Weigh it all out, balance it out, and keep moving the thing forward. So that's what we got to do. Keep it moving forward. And I commend the Ringling. Art speaks. Art is always the place where change happens, and it holds that for history and through time.
Mhm.
And we really appreciate that. And I look forward. It's exciting to be working with you and the rest of the team on this. So thank you, Laura.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Merritt. And really, I mean, thank you for all you do for our community and leading us forward. And keep up the great work. And thank you.
You too. God
Okay.
bless.